though I don't like doing that, but I didn't mess up. So, I'm not going to give much of her story away, but I'll share this. This is a young woman chose to serve in our country as a very proud member of the U.S. Army in Iraq, where she made nearly the ultimate sacrifice. She was the first woman to lose a limb in active combat and for her services to our country. She was awarded the Bronze Star and the Purple Heart. For that, I would like to thank her, and I'm sure all of you would like to thank her. Since she has turned herself today into a world champion athlete, in fact, a three-time world champion, who once again proudly represented her country as a member of the Team USA at the 2008 Paralympic Games in Beijing, and again at Rio in 2016, the Paralympic Games, where she won a bronze medal in a USA sweep in the sport of para-triathlon. She is a co-founder, she's amazing, she's a co-founder of the nonprofit sport group Dare to Try, through which she has helped hundreds of people living with disabilities not only return to sport, but more importantly build confidence, self-esteem, and renewed passion for living. On top of it all, probably what she would claim is her greatest accomplishment, she's a mom, and she has a little boy who's almost 4, and a second child, a daughter, who's almost 1. She's a patriot in every sense of the word. She's my hero. Please join me in welcoming Melissa Stockwell.
On April 13th of 2004, I woke up with 2 legs, but I went to sleep that night with 1 leg. I can tell you that that was not part of my to-do list for that day, nor was that part of my life plan. I'm sure many of you would agree if I asked you if your life has gone as planned, the answer would probably be no. That's kind of the beauty of life, right? I knew that my chosen profession as a military officer was a risky one, but you never think something like this is going to happen to you until it does. In a moment, I want to tell you the story of that day, but first I want to ask all of you a question. If you experienced a sudden, dramatic, life-changing event, which I know many of you have with the fires this past year, could you and would you weather the storm? Could you deal with it? Would you not only weather the storm, but could you come out better on the other side? I know it's hard to think about for some of you, but could you do it? A little bit of a gut check here. I believe that you could, and I know that you can, and today I'm going to tell you why. But first, I want to thank you for having me here today. I want to congratulate all of you on being here as well. I've never been to Reno before, and I have never spoken in a room that has a pool in it. I'm going to check that one off my bucket list, which I didn't even know was on my bucket list. But to begin my story, I'm going to take you many, many years back. To me, as a young gymnast, so I'm sure many of you were athletes when you were younger, and I was no different. I dreamed of being an Olympic gymnast, and I was in the gym before school, after school. I had, the Olympic gymnasts everywhere. And before we gymnastics meet, I would stand on that format, as we always did, put my hand on my heart, and we would sing the national anthem as we looked at that American flag. And I would imagine myself getting the perfect 10 on that American flag, because that was every young gymnast's dream. And while that never happened, what did happen was developing a deep love for our country, for the red, the white, and the blue, realizing at a young age how lucky we are to live in the country that we do. And as I grew a little bit older and I saw military personnel around community, on TV, I saw a flag patch on their shoulder, and I knew that that's what I wanted to do when I grew up. So my story eventually led me out to the University of Colorado in Boulder. Freshman year, I saw cadets marching around campus with that uniform on, and I could tell that they were part of a team, and I wanted to be part of that. So sophomore year, I was basically a recruiter's dream because I marched into his office and I said, I want to join the Army, where do I sign? He said, well, sign here, so I did. And in turn, he handed me my very first uniform. I went back to my dorm room, I put it on, and I knew that that's what I was supposed to do with my life. Now, I don't come from a military background. My parents knew of my desire to be in the Army, but they kind of thought it was a phase I was passing through, because why would their youngest daughter actually want to join the Army? So imagine their surprise when sophomore year they get a phone call, and I'm like, guess what, Mom and Dad? I just joined ROTC, I'm going to be in the Army. And there's kind of this awkward pause, as parents do so well. And suddenly my dad blurted out, they allow girls in the Army? So it was this unknown world, and we were all diving into it together. But of course, they allowed girls, and I fell in love with it. I got to wear the uniform, I got to paint my face in camo, I got to learn battle drills, I got to learn leadership skills, I got to roll around in the mud, rappel down rocks. I loved it. And then, senior year in college, and a day that we'll never forget, and that truly changed the world, September 11th of 2001. And if you recall, this day was a Tuesday. And like every other Tuesday, it was ROTC day. I was in my uniform. I was sitting with my fellow cadets watching the news unfold on TV. And it was this day that our instructor looked at us and he said, today your lives are going to change. It's not a matter of if you would deploy over to a foreign country. It's more a matter of when. So the uniform that I was so proud to wear on American soil, I knew I'd probably be wearing it on foreign soil as well. But first, I graduated and was commissioned as a second lieutenant with my once very skeptical but now very proud parents by my side. And I set off to what was going to be at least 4 years of active duty in the Army. The fateful day of April 13th, 2004. It started out just like any other day over in Iraq. We got up early, I had my uniform on, my weapon in hand, my bulletproof vest on, and we had our briefing for the day's mission. On this particular day, we were going to go to a place called the Green Zone, which was in central Baghdad. If there was ever a cool place to go in Iraq, it was the Green Zone, because Saddam Hussein had his palaces there, there were these monuments, and I actually had my camera on my bulletproof vest, ready to take it out and take some pictures if the moment arose. The only big difference in this day is that instead of leading the convoy, as I was supposed to be doing, I was doing what's called a ride-along. So I was sitting behind the driver, where normally I would be next to the driver, and my only job this day was to learn the route, because the next day I'd be taking over and leading that route. So we left the gate about 10 a.m. About 10 minutes into the ride, we came up across this bridge. And the drivers are taught to swerve under the bridge in case somebody is on the bridge and is to drop something into the vehicle. So our driver starts to swerve, and suddenly there is this big boom. The loudest sound I've ever heard. There's black smoke, the smell of metal. I look up, the windshield is cracked, our vehicle is swerving to the left, we ricochet off of a guardrail, we swerve back to the right, and we end up crashing into this Iraqi woman's house. We had been through situations like this in training, that's what training's for. And everybody executed what they should do perfectly. They got out of the vehicle, they surrounded it, they pointed their weapons out to assess the situation, to see what we should do next. So I started to do just that. I reached over, I took my seatbelt off, I looked down, I knew something wasn't right. There was a lot of blood. I called out, I'm hurt, I'm hurt. Lucky for me, there was a combat medic who was trained in field first aid 2 vehicles back. He heard me calling out, he rushed up to my vehicle, he pulled me out, and he laid me there on the sands of Iraq. At the time, I had no idea the extent of the injury. In my mind, I thought it was something, he was giving me some sort of first aid. There seemed to be so much commotion going on, and I couldn't really understand why. I was laying on my back. I couldn't see what was below me, and I tried to move my leg and my foot. I know now that my leg and my foot were gone. I know now it's called phantom pain or phantom sensation, where you think you have something, but you no longer do. And I know now that that medic wasn't just performing a life, he wasn't just performing first aid, but he was actually saving my life. And it wasn't until the medic put a tourniquet on, where number one, the pain started, and number two, the realization that it probably wasn't as good as I thought. And a few days later, seeing this vehicle, this picture, realizing that that was my Humvee, that was my blood, and that was the Gatorade bottle that I was looking at. A picture that was once hard to look at, but this many years later, I can look at it and realize how far I've come. But from that moment, it was hard to believe that just 1 year earlier, I was on my very first duty assignment in Fort Hood, Texas. 23 years old, a brand new second lieutenant, and I was put in charge of millions of dollars worth of equipment, put in charge of soldiers that were older than I was. A daunting challenge, but one that I was ready and eager to take on. And then a few months later, orders came down that the 1st Cavalry Division, so my unit, was going to deploy over to Iraq. I knew my time was going to come, and here it was. So in March of 2003, boarded a plane, flew overseas. We got off the plane into this desert landscape. The heat hit me, the weight of the equipment, and really just the magnitude of the situation. Being in Kuwait for a few weeks before making the long trek up into Iraq, and crossing that line from Kuwait into Iraq, and your heart starts to beat a little bit faster. Getting to the bustling city of Baghdad, where there are people in commotion everywhere, and not knowing if they want you there, do they not want you there, or really what your day-to-day life is going to be like. Eventually ending in the town of Taji, which was just north of central Baghdad, and where we were going to be for the next year. So over in Iraq, I had 2 jobs. The first one was my favorite, because I got to be in charge of 20 men and women, a lot of them just out of high school, trying to find their way in the world. And they find themselves with me as their leader in this faraway land, and we become family. That camaraderie is stronger than ever. My other job was as a company commander. So I got to lead a whole bunch of vehicles from one point to the next, delivering various supplies, in charge of the route, the soldiers, just kind of making sure everything went as planned. I'd been in Iraq for 3 short weeks, but I was a proud soldier. I was carrying out missions. I was leading soldiers. I just never thought that a roadside bomb would happen to me, because you always think that's going to happen to somebody else. But this time, it was me. And I was lifted, kind of like out of a movie, from the sands of Iraq. I was put in the back of this big pickup truck, this big 5-ton vehicle, driven to the nearest aid station, where I was put on a helicopter and I was flown, coincidentally enough, to the green zone. So I got there, just not quite like I had planned on it. I was taken off the helicopter. I was rushed into a life-saving surgery. And it wasn't until I woke up from the surgery where I looked to the gentleman next to me and I said, "Did something happen to my leg?" I still had no idea. And that's when he looked at me and he said, "Your leg is gone. You don't have it anymore." And then he handed me a phone and said, "Would you like to call your parents?" Being a mother now, I can't imagine the horror of a phone call that your youngest daughter has been severely wounded in a war. And I remember this phone call because the phone rang, my mom picked up, all excited, because she hadn't heard from me in a while. And I had to stop her and tell her, "Mom, something happened." And I handed the phone to the surgeon, who then continued to tell her that I no longer had my leg as I heard my mom on the other end of the phone. Moments that stick with you forever. From that moment, I realized early on that I had choices. I had a path I could take, an uphill path or a downhill path. Was I going to move on or was I going to live in the past? And I decided to choose to move on from day one. And move on first to launch Jewel Army Medical Center, which is where all the wounded soldiers went before making the long trip back to the US. And it was here where my sister, who just happened to be living in Slovakia, my dad, who was on business in Austria, was able to rush into my hospital room the day after this life-changing injury. Talk about starting things off on the right foot, literally the right foot. That's supposed to be funny. Spending a few weeks in Germany, or a few days, I'm sorry, before making the long trip back to the United States. This time to Walter Reed Army Medical Center, which is where all the wounded soldiers at the time went for their rehab. And it was here where my mom met me. My mom and my dad, again, once skeptical, then standing by my side, and now being there through every surgery, wondering with me what my life would be like, and a lot of times reassuring each other that things were going to be okay. Now, if any of you have ever been to a military hospital, you would agree with me that it is a very powerful place. And when I was able to come to and look around, I saw soldiers who were missing 2, 3, 4 limbs, their eyesight, they had traumatic brain injuries. And I looked at myself and I thought, wow, am I lucky? One leg, that was it. And I made a promise then to live my life for those that were missing more, for those that had given their life, because I felt so fortunate to still have mine. And not to let losing a leg stop me from doing anything that I wanted to do. And I did receive a Purple Heart and a Bronze Star, but what made my time at Walter Reed great was the medical care I received. My family and friends who dropped everything they were doing to rush to my bedside to let me know that they were there for me. But as you can imagine, it can be trying. 24 years of my life with both of my legs, suddenly I'm missing one. Laying there in my hospital bed, wondering what life would be like. But lucky for me at Walter Reed, they always did things to help us pass the time. We always had visitors, celebrities, high-ranking politicians, military officers, whoever it was. And every morning the nurses would come in and they would say, "Guess who's coming today?" And it was always this moment of excitement. And I'd like to share my 2 favorites because they obviously stood out. So one morning the nurse runs in, she's all excited, she's like, "Guess who's coming today?" And I'm like, "Oh, who?" And she's like, "Tom Hanks is coming." And a few hours later, Tom Hanks walks in the room and sits on the bed. We have a great conversation. That night there's some event and he gives me a shout out. I think I'm, the coolest person ever. And then a few weeks later, who walks in the room but the Osbournes. Now, I don't know how to small talk with the Osbournes. If you do, please share that with me. But Sharon sat on the bed, Ozzy kind of wandered around. There was a stack of like 10 chairs he tried to climb, and they were a little bit blurry, kind of like the picture, but I will never forget. And I am thankful that they took the time out of their lives to come and tell us that what we had done mattered. I also learned at Walter Reed that it was, as silly as it sounds, that it's okay to celebrate the loss of a leg. And a lot of soldiers at Walter Reed had what they called Alive Days. So every year, on the day that they lost, whatever they lost, instead of mourning it, they celebrate what they have. They celebrate life. How genius is that? So I decided I would take it one step further. I would name, and I named what's left of my leg, Little Leg, and decided that every year we were going to have a birthday for Little Leg. And we are going to celebrate, this is actually my leg with a hat on it that says, "Life is good," and that every year on April 13th, we were going to celebrate life. Not just Little Leg's life, not just my life, but everybody's life. Because when you think about it, when's the last time that you stepped back, thought about your own life, and celebrated it? So every year on April 13th, we celebrate Little Leg's birthday. But back at Walter Reed, down in the physical therapy room and regaining the strength that I had lost after laying in my hospital bed for so long. And then the day came when I was being fit for my first prosthetic leg in a series of castings and measurements. And you kind of get casted and they take these measurements, and a few days later they hand you this leg and they're like, now walk. And you're like, okay, it's like this piece of plastic and metal, you're not quite sure what to do with it. And I remember this day because I looked across the physical therapy gym and I saw a gentleman missing both of his legs and an arm, and he was walking. Talk about perspective. That's what you do. You walk. First in the parallel bars, and then crutches, and then a cane, and then you realize that you will be independent again, that life will go on. As soon as I started to walk, though, I always wanted more. I wanted to be an athlete again. I mentioned that I was a gymnast, but I was an athlete growing up, but I strived. I would lay in my hospital bed dreaming about feeling the wind in my face, the sweat, and being that athlete. So as exciting as this was, even more exciting is what I like to call the start of Melissa Stockwell 2.0. So luckily at Walter Reed, there were these organizations whose mission was literally to come into our hospital bed room, get us out of our bed, and get us out doing things that we never thought we'd do with 2 legs, much less with 1. So I took every opportunity that came, and before I knew it, I was at the New York City Marathon, riding on a hand-powered bike, 26.2 miles, something I never thought I would do. And then a few weeks later, I found myself out in Colorado, and after growing up skiing with 2 legs, learning how to balance on one leg with these poles that have little skis on the end of them, on the bunny hill the first day, and then working my way up, and by the end of the week, all the way up that chairlift, flying down the mountain, the wind in my hair, being just a little bit reckless, but never feeling so free in my entire life. And I went back to Walter Reed and I thought, if I can do that, I can do anything. And it came at a pretty amazing time because somebody, a week later, came to Walter Reed to talk about the U.S. Paralympics. And I sat in a room, kind of like all of you are here today, and I listened as somebody told me that if I trained hard enough, if I dedicated myself to a sport, that I could represent our country on the world's biggest athletic stage for somebody with a disability. Talk about a dream being born. I left that meeting knowing that somehow, someway, I was going to be a Paralympian. But first I was medically retired, so medically retired from the Army, and I went back to school for a new profession, this time in the field of prosthetics. So learning how to fit other amputees with artificial limbs, a field I didn't even know existed until I needed a leg of my own. But being in the Paralympics was always in the forefront of my mind. And in 2005, I knew that there was going to be a 2008 Beijing Paralympic Games. And I decided that I wanted to give it a shot in the sport of swimming. So if any of you are swimmers out there, you can probably agree with me that the water has a healing effect. I got in the water and it just made me feel whole. Not to mention, I had a lot of room for improvement, and I randomly loved the smell of chlorine, so it all kind of worked out. So just like when I was younger in gymnastics, I found myself in the pool, in the morning, in the evening, all with this goal of making the Paralympics. Now the Paralympics is not like the military, you just sign up and go. You have to beat your competitors, you have to make certain times. So I decided to put everything on hold and move out to the Olympic Training Center in Colorado Springs, where I slept and swam and swam and swam. My times were here, they had to be way down here, and I would slowly see them start coming down. But there was a Paralympic trials, almost 4 years to the day after losing my leg, and I was a total long shot to make the team going into it. But I learned a pretty important lesson at this meet, and that hard work pays off. I took 20 seconds off a 400-meter freestyle. I broke American records I didn't even know existed. I was so far from them. And at the end of this meet, when they named the 2008 Paralympic team, and my name was on it, this whole journey from Baghdad, now I was going to go to Beijing, and it all came full circle, and it just made sense. So naturally, the next step was Beijing, and I'm sure some of you saw the 2008 Olympic Games, and you saw Michael Phelps win his 8 gold medals in this water cube that was built just for the Olympic and the Paralympic Games. So the Paralympic Games being 2 weeks after the Olympics, I got to watch him win these gold medals. And then 2 weeks later, I found myself standing in that water cube with my coach, imagining myself on that podium, taking another 20 seconds off because that was realistic, but doing whatever I could to make our country proud. So I swam in a few swimming events, some freestyle, some butterfly, and every day I would go out to the blocks and I would look up into the stands and I would see a flag that said Little Leg Fan Club. And I knew that regardless of what happened, that they were there for me, whatever the outcome was. I wish I could tell you that I got a medal on that podium, or that I even did well, but I didn't have best times. I didn't make finals. At the end of the Paralympic Games, I got a participation medal, which at the time I wanted to chuck out the window because I'm like, I came all this way, and that's all I got? But I learned a pretty cool lesson. At the end of the meet, I felt like I had let everybody down. My teammates, my family, my friends, the country. But at the end of the Paralympic Games, there's a closing ceremony, and somebody is nominated to carry the American flag and represent the entire delegation, typically someone who's done well athletically, who has those medals. So when my teammates nominated me for this honor, I learned that in life, we want the recognition, we want the medals, but a lot of times the journey is so much more important. Having the heart to persevere things that come your way. And being able to carry this object that I was so passionate about into a sold-out stadium in Beijing, China, representing the entire US delegation. Talk about moments that you wish you'd go back and relive over and over again. And for me, this was one of them. So how do you beat that? How do you be competing in the Paralympic Games, carrying the flag in? Well, I did what most people would do, and I went back to work. Again, in a field of prosthetics, and realizing how rewarding it was to literally help people get back up on their feet and to see what was possible. But once an athlete, always an athlete. And I knew I wasn't done with athletics. So in 2009, I was ready to do a triathlon. Now, triathlons, swim, bike, and run, something I kind of thought only crazy people did, because who wants to do all that in the same day at the same time? But I was invited to do this race, and I thought, all right, I'll give it a shot. So I flew out to California, I swam, I biked, I ran, I crossed that finish line, I was hooked. The challenge of all three sports, being on the same course as able-bodied athletes, the challenge of the different prosthetic legs, and coming in after the swim, and putting on my biking leg, and biking, and then taking off my biking leg, putting my running leg on, there's legs flying everywhere, and trying to get to the finish line as quick as I can, and I loved it. And it turns out I wasn't too bad at it. For the next many years, able to be a part of the national team and compete around the nation and around the world. Be able to compete in my first World Championships in Budapest, Hungary in 2010. Be able to come across the finish line in first and to finally be on that podium and to get that World Championship medal. And then again, the next year in Beijing, China, and the third time in New Zealand. And let me tell you that crossing the finish line with that flag overhead never gets old. And then in 2013, wanted to step it up a notch and not just challenge myself physically, but mentally as well, and sign up for the elusive Ironman, which, if anybody knows, really is for those who are a little bit crazy, because you swim 2.4 miles, you bike 112, and you're on a marathon, 26.2 miles, and you have 17 hours to do this race, and you pay to do this. So I started this race in 2013, knowing that I wasn't going to win it. My goal was just to finish it. Swam, biked, get on that run, and by mile 20 of that run, I am asking myself, what am I doing here? I paid to do this thing. I was holding my little glow stick, it's dark out, there's nobody around. Why on earth am I out here? What am I doing? And I realized that I had to dig deep and ask myself why I was there. And I was there because I could be. I was running because I was alive and because I could. And using that motivation to get to that finish line, find the motivation from the crowd, that flag overhead, and hearing the words that I was an Ironman. And realizing at that moment that we don't give ourselves enough credit on the things that we are capable of doing. So next week, on Saturday, is April 13th, and it would be 15 years since I lost my leg. It's crazy to look back and think of all the things that have happened. I'm still an extremely proud American. I'm a proud above-the-knee amputee, and I show my leg off wherever I can. And true to word, every year we have a party. So Little Leg's birthday has become this big event where family and friends fly in, there's party favors, there's dancing, there's celebrating, there's a cake. We may or may not drink out of my leg, but that's for those that come to find out. But it's truly a day to celebrate. And again, not just Little Leg, not just my life, but everybody's life. And for me, it's really a day of reflection. Because over the past 15 years, I've had some pretty incredible moments. Been able to share, dance, and ride a bike with George Bush on his ranch down in Texas. I even got a presidential kiss when I presented him with an American flag that flew over the Olympic Village in Beijing. Been able to share my story with Katie Couric and your viewers. Who doesn't dream about a fist bump with Tom Brokaw? I've been able to stand in a room with, at the time, were all 5 living presidents and their spouses. On a day that wasn't about politics, as so much is these days, but it was about honoring a president, George Bush, and the opening of his library down in Texas. And the honor of being asked to say the Pledge of Allegiance, and going home this night just dripping in red, white, and blue. Just so proud of where my story had brought me. Been able to share a laugh with Michelle Obama, ride my bike around DC with Barack. And most recently, some of you may have seen a book called Portraits of Courage. It's a book that President Bush painted of over 60 wounded soldiers. And the honor of not just being in the book, but having this dance that we shared, painted by him and forever memorialized in the book and in my office at home. And if you haven't checked it out, you should, because proceeds go towards helping veterans like myself reintegrate back into civilian life. But out of all this, what I'm most proud of is giving back. Because I wouldn't be here today if it weren't for organizations and people that believed in me. So back in Chicago, starting a nonprofit called Dare to Try. It's a para-triathlon club where we get athletes with physical disabilities into the sport of triathlon. And you take somebody like an 8-year-old Amanda, who's missing a leg like I am. She gets bullied in school, because kids are tough. She finds out about Dare to Try, and we provide her with the coaching, the adaptive equipment, everything she needs to get to that starting line. She swims, she bikes, she runs. Crosses that finish line, she gets a medal that says that she is a triathlete. She goes to school the next day, and she's a school hero. We change lives, not just of our athletes, but the families as well. And it truly is my proudest professional accomplishment. And then, of course, on the personal side, my family. My husband, Brian, my kids, Dallas and Millie. And the motivation to get up every day, to chase my dreams, to make it even bigger, in hopes that my kids see me dream big, and in turn, they dream big of their own. And the cool part about being a mom with a robot leg, as they call it, and showing them that it doesn't matter what you look like, you can still get out there and be anything you want to be. So it's been a wild ride. And if I could go back and do it again, I would. Because I've learned a lot along the way. I've learned that life is short, as I'm sure many of you know more than others. And as cheesy as it sounds, I've learned that dreams come true. And in September of 2016, my dad. Because I had my daughter Millie, and I was able to come back and qualify for the 2016 Rio Paralympic Games in the sport of triathlon. Of all days that my race could have taken place, the day was September 11th. You can imagine the meaning. I woke up in Rio that morning, put on my USA uniform, and realized that my race was about so much more than me. every swim stroke, every bike pedal, every run step were for those who had given that ultimate sacrifice. Swimming, biking, and running up and down the streets of Copacabana Beach in Rio. Coming across the finish line in third place, getting a bronze medal that felt like a personal gold. Standing on a podium on a historic day because my teammates got gold and silver in a USA sweep on September 11th. Standing on that podium, watching not one but 3 American flags go up as we heard our national anthem, showing the world how much ability is in a disability, and one of my proudest moments. And this time, hugging my dad and my husband with tears of joy, just so proud of what happened that day. And the best part about it was going home, putting my medal around my son's neck in the culmination of the hashtag Mommy Road to Rio. And because my son was too young to be there, they did have jumbo heads made of him for my family to bob around the race course for that extra motivation. So to start my closing, I want to share with you some things that you can think about, whether it's tonight as you drift off to sleep, maybe the next couple days as you're in the casino. 15 years ago, I lost my leg, but I have learned more about myself and done more with my life than I had in the 24 years prior. Some of these things I'm going to tell you are cliche, but cliches exist because they're true, right? The first thing is the power of teamwork. I have learned that the joy in teamwork, not just in how much you can accomplish as a team versus as an individual, but the joy of accomplishing something together. Teamwork in the military is everywhere. It resonated in everything that we did. And nothing says that truer than my teammates, my soldiers, who literally saved my life on April 13th. I've been fortunate to experience teamwork outside the military. When I crossed that finish line in Rio, when I stood on that podium, it wasn't just me up there. It was my team, my husband who believed in me, my son who motivated me, my teammates, my coaches who pushed me to be the best athlete I could be. It was my team that got me there. You guys should find your team. Your team is here. Find people that you trust in, find people that you rely on, because we're all in this life together. I've also come to realize that greatness lies within all of us. A lot of times we don't give ourselves enough credit on the things that we're capable of doing. I've seen that both at my work with Dare to Try, but also on the Paralympic side of things. As a Paralympian, I have met athletes who are the best of the best in their respective sport. And if you meet them, your first thought is that they have superpowers. They are superheroes because of the things that they've accomplished. But I'm here to tell you that they're not. They can't be because there's too many of them. There's no coincidence that all these people with superpowers lost limbs or lost their eyesight, and they show up at the Paralympic Games every 2 or 4 years to showcase them. That just wouldn't make sense. Instead, what I've come to learn is that these people are everyday people who have gone through instances, traumatic events for me, losing a limb, and it has urged them to dig deeper, to find the potential that they have, to find the capabilities that are there in them. I told you I did an Ironman a few years back, and if you would have asked my two-legged self if I would ever do an Ironman, my answer would have been, no way. No way could I spend 17 hours out there swimming, biking, and running. But I would have been wrong, because I did. Not only did I do an Ironman, but I did it with one leg, which means I could have done it with 2 legs. Losing my leg caused me to dig deeper, to find those capabilities, to find the potential that was already there. I like to say I've done more in my life with 1 leg than I ever would have done with 2. But I realize now that that was there all along. So I guess the question that we ask is, how do you skip the traumatic part? How do you skip the roadside bomb part and move to finding your own potential, digging into your own capabilities? Well, you start by believing that you can. You put yourself in certain situations and you ask, can I do more? Can I blank? And you fill in that blank with whatever your Ironman is, whatever you have dreams of doing. So perhaps the most important thing I have learned is this. So this picture is of me when I'm in the Baghdad emergency room. You could say this was the lowest point of my life. I very nearly died. The T on my forehead stands for tourniquet. It's a crude yet effective way of somebody who finds me on the battlefield knowing that I was severely injured. But when I look at this T, I don't think of tourniquet anymore. I think of it as T standing for turning point. Because I realize now that we all have the power to choose our own path in life. We can't rewrite the past, we can't go back and change it, but we can choose what we do moving forward. We all have metaphoric roadside bombs that are in all of our lives, some bigger than others, some small. They're going to happen whether we like it or not, but it's up to us how we deal with them. Ending up at Walter Reed was the best thing that could have happened to me, not just because of the medical care I received there, but because it forced me to have this perspective. There at Walter Reed, if I would have chosen to say, oh, woe is me, I lost my leg, I don't think anybody would have blamed me. But instead I looked around and I said, I'm going to choose to live my life. I'm going to choose to say I lost only one leg, and now let's get back to living. We all have unexpected things that happen, but it's up to us on how we deal with them. There's an ancient Greek philosopher who once said, men and women are not disturbed by the things that happen to them, but by their opinions of what happened to them. I did not choose to have my leg taken from me by a roadside bomb, but I did choose to let it not take the rest of my life. So I'm going to leave you with this thought. The next time you're stuck in traffic, the next time something doesn't go your way at the office, the next time a metaphoric roadside bomb comes your way, how are you going to choose to deal with it? Thank you.